I am Vinnie Tortorich. Folks, your good intentions have been stolen, but don't worry. I'm here to help you get them back. You may be soft and succulent at the beginning of this process, but hang in there. Before long, you too will be a cowboy. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I want to be a cowboy right now because we're going to be talking about cowboys. Well, not particularly cowboys. Actually, we're going to be talking about cowgirls. Yeah, that you guys never thought they existed, but they're out there. These two women, they're taking the internet by storm. Yeah, they're taking no prisoners. One's a dairy farmer, and the other one is a cattle farmer, a rancher. I don't know, depending on what part of the country you're from. If you're from the East Coast, you're a cattle farmer. If you're in the West Coast, you're a cattle rancher. Most people don't know that about, I knew that growing up because the people next door raised cattle. That's just the way it worked. I'm talking about Natalie Kovarik and Tara Vander. Oh, yeah. Yeah. These women are cowgirls. Now, hi, guys. How are you doing?
Hi, good. Thanks for having us on.
No, look, the pleasure is all mine. You guys invited me on your show, and I had such a wonderful time. I was like, man, more people need to know about these women and what they're doing. So I decided hey, why not just bring them on my show? We got a couple of listeners. Maybe some of these people will go over and listen to what you guys are doing. So that was the whole impetus for having you guys on.
We'd love that. We'd love that, Vinny. And you know what? We're actually looking for a new intro song. And I think you inspired us to maybe give us, a certain little more flair to our podcast. Yeah.
I bet you never had walk-up music like that, right?
It's a first. I will say Kid Rock is my favorite artist, though, so I really appreciated that.
Yeah, some of us call him Bob, if we know him, but other people call him Kid Rock. At any rate, what is your lead in music? Do you guys have music on your show?
Yeah, we have a little bit of music that comes in, but yeah, we've been working on changing it up for us over at Discover Ag Podcast.
Yeah. Give that out. Tell people where they can find you. Let's start off with that. Where can they find you guys?
Yeah, you can find us on our podcast. If you're listening to this, obviously you're a podcast person. We love podcast people. You can find us at Discover Ag Podcast, and then you can find us all over the internet at our names. I'm at Tara Vander.
And I'm at Natalie Kovarik.
And by the way, guys, they're both married women, but pretty easy on the eyes. I'm going to be honest with you. You want to go. As a matter of fact, I went and looked up you guys after we were done on the Instagram, and you're there with your family, and you're sometimes on horseback. You got your kids, the whole thing. I love what you guys are doing. I love everything around what you guys are doing. How do you end up, and either one of you can start off, because one of you're raising dairy cattle and the other is a rancher for beef cattle. How do you get into that? Do you marry into it? Were your family into it beforehand? Let's start with you, Natalie.
Sure. So I did grow up in agriculture, but I'm not on my family ranch. So I kind of married into it, I guess. I originally grew up in Southwest Montana on a cattle ranch there too. Very beautiful part of the state. People always wonder how in the heck I left Montana to go to Nebraska, which is where I am now. But it was because of my husband. When I left the ranch for my education, I ended up going to school for pharmacy. And that's what I was doing in Montana before I met him. I was practicing pharmacy full time. I lived very close to a ranch, so ranching was still very much a part of my life, but I really never saw it being a part of my life the way it is now. I did not see me living on a ranch. I did not see me, getting my income from a ranch, and I definitely didn't see me sharing about ranching online. And so that all changed when I met and married my husband, and we ended up down here in Nebraska where he was ranching, and we're actually a first generation ranch. He kind of started it when he came back from college. So it's pretty cool that I get both the experience of growing up in it, but also the experience of, starting something for ourselves.
What's interesting is when I left California, one of the places I wanted to, we had a short list of where I wanted to move to and where Serena wanted to move to. And Montana was on that list.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, look, I used to go there when I was an ultra cyclist in the summer, I would go do little mini camps where I would just, just take it to the woodshed, as they say, just go there with my bikes, and there was no going out or doing anything. And I would just use Yellowstone as my playground.
Mhm.
Right. And just all the climbing, all the mountains, all the open expanses you would ever want to have. I can do 200 miles in one day and only see that route one time. It wasn't like you were going back and forth and monotonous. It was just incredible. I really wanted to move there, but Serena wanted to be closer to home. She's from England. So she said, we have to be somewhere on the East Coast because our parents are getting older. You have to fly back and forth and that sort of thing. And so I did that, and I said, okay, I'll move to the East Coast, but as soon as I can get a hunting cabin in Montana, I'm going to get myself a hunting cabin. I don't have it yet, but it's going to come one day. So, yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't have picked a better state. I feel like I actually took it for granted, like a lot of things you do in life, until you get older and you start seeing other places. And then I realized the beauty that I was born into. It is a really beautiful state. And like you said, there's just a lot to see, a lot of ground to cover. It's a big state and it's got a big sky. It's like deserving of that name for sure.
What was what town did you grow up in, or what town was close to your town?
I grew up in a very small town, but the name that some people might recognize is Bozeman. It's kind of Big Sky area, Bozeman area. So southwest, very beautiful part of the state.
So you're right. You were right off the edge of Yellowstone Park and all that.
I wasn't far from a couple of the entrances, probably hour and a half, 2 hours. Again, another thing I just took for granted. I mean, I can remember taking field trips when I was like in 6th grade to Yellowstone, not thinking it was that big of a deal because we just did it. You could do it. You had access to it. And then as you get older, you realize that families are creating trips out of this. People are coming from overseas for this. When things are in your backyard, you just kind of take them for granted, unfortunately.
Yeah. And, look, I grew up near New Orleans, and everyone's like, take me. It's like, oh, we have to go to New Orleans again? Are you serious? No, I don't want to do that, but you don't know what you have until you don't have it. Right. Did you grow up skiing? Any of that?
Yeah, it was a big part of my life, especially before I moved too. I did it quite a bit, almost every weekend through the winter. I have not done it since I have moved to Nebraska, but I bet I could still dust off a snowboard and, shred the hills a little bit.
Well, look, I mean, I'm getting back into it this coming winter because, we moved here, COVID happened, I'm trying to get things rolling. I'm working on this, that, and the other thing. And I told Serena, I said, this winter, I'm back. I'm back full. I'm going to spend time skiing. And by the way, I don't want to ski on the East Coast. I need to go back west, and probably I'll go back to Big Sky. I have a place to stay there. I can go to Aspen, but Aspen's become a kind of a dickhead place to go. I still love going to Mammoth. Mammoth is still one of my favorite mountains. And
what I am taking from this conversation, Vinnie, is that I think you and I have a trip to Montana in our future.
Look, yes, would love to meet you out there on the slopes. Absolutely. Now, Tara, what about you? You ski? I'm trying to get dates here, folks. You like skiing? Where are you from? Tell them where you're from, and let's get a little background on you.
Yeah, definitely. And I do ski. New Mexico also has great skiing. Let's not like totally, to Montana's horn. New Mexico's pretty great too. But no, I'm similar to Natalie's story. I grew up, I'm a 5th generation dairy farmer, and then I also married into it as well. So I married a 5th generation dairy farmer, and we dairy farm now with his parents and several of his brothers. And then also similar to Natalie, I left the farm and went and got my degree in environmental science, and kind of saw myself doing something different with environmental science, but it actually ended up being a really great fit to come back to the farm when I got married and work as an environmental consultant for dairies throughout New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona, pretty much the Southwest, and just kind of assist dairy farmers with their environmental regulations and permitting. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years until I 2 years ago kind of stepped away from that to go more full time in what Natalie and I do with the podcast sharing online, as you saw and checked out on our pages, and just telling people more about agriculture.
You're going to think I'm bullshitting.
Okay.
But the other place we considered moving.
I was going to say, not you, Vinnie, not you.
I don't bullshit. I don't. We thought about moving to New Mexico. And Taos, because I love to ski, I love mountains and the whole thing. Taos is one of those places. And I've spent a great amount of time. As a matter of fact, when we were finally driving across country, we had all of our, the big caravans took all of our furniture and everything. But so we drove across casually with the dogs. And so we had to stop a few times. And, I said, you know what? We're going to stop. I want you to see what New Mexico is about. And we stopped in New Mexico for a day because she had never been there. Right. And we stayed. Yeah, and she loved it. I said, look, this state has the best smelling fireplaces on the planet.
For sure.
Yeah, you guys have the wood. I mean, and by the way, you can't get that wood in California. They won't get it across state lines.
Oh, because of bringing in like foreign whatever.
Because California's nuts. I can't bring a log in. So I can bring in all the heroin I want, all the crack, and pot is legal. All that fine. But boy, don't get caught with a log.
We gotta draw the line somewhere, Vinnie.
I'm not surprised that you love Taos, that you were also considering Montana. Taos is beautiful. All of northern New Mexico. New Mexico is a really cool state that you can have the desert down south with like palm trees and just fairy desert, and then up north the snow, mountains, skiing. But the company I worked for consulting for 10 years was based in Santa Fe, and so I really loved that part of my job, that I got to go up to Santa Fe at least once a month and go hang out, enjoy the good food, and enjoy the mountains.
You ever go to my favorite place in Santa Fe, La Posada? That's where I stay whenever I go there.
Me too. Oh man. All right. We're planning a trip to New Mexico to Santa Fe too. I love La Posada. I just went there this winter, and actually I did not go skiing. My husband took our girls skiing, and I stayed back and went to the spa at La Posada, and I do not regret my decision at all.
Yeah. I mean, you go to, or us locals like to call it La Pa. You go to La Pa, you get there, you go with your wife or whatever, they could get all the beauty treatments they want all day long. You could pop right over to Taos, it's not that far away. You ski all day, you come back, right?
Yep.
Get yourself, just hop in the steam. They got the saunas, they got the whole deal. People go, really, you do it? It's like, yeah, I love the West. I love desert. Serena hates desert. I love the desert atmosphere. I love mountains. I love all of that, right? And like I said, best smelling fireplaces in the world.
Love that.
Of the wood. Yeah. All right. Go on. No, go on.
I was going to say, whenever we guest on podcasts, Tara always brags about New Mexico and the chilies, and that they have the largest cheese plant. But now she can add a third thing to the list, that they have the best smelling firewood. And I feel like it's the trifecta. It's very powerful.
There is nothing not to like. And like I said, folks, if you ever go to New Mexico, go to La Posada. It's like a spa, but you're not beholden to stay in the spa. You have the whole town, right? It's like you go around, you shop, you do the whole thing, and then you can go back to the spa and do something if you want. I'm not a big spa. I don't need massages all day long, and I'm not a pedicure guy. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. But it's nice having that steam room and that, sauna and all that kind of stuff. So we talked about the pampering here, but look, I got to be honest with you. I grew up around farms, and that's not an easy life, right? You have to wake up early and you get up early and you're up late every night. Running a farm is not for wimps. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
So what's it like? Let's start with you, Tara. What's it like running a dairy farm? How many cattle do you have? Well, you wouldn't call them cattle. I guess you have cows.
Yes, we have cows. Yeah, so we have a couple different dairy barns. We're a larger operation. People love to throw around the word factory farm, but I mean, we are a bigger dairy, but we're still family owned and operated. And on the dairy I live on, we milk about 1,800 cows. We milk them 2 times a day, feed them 2 times a day. Every single day of the year, all year round. Actually, thinking about kind of growing up on a farm and what it's like. I mean, it was one of those things that we didn't open Christmas presents until my dad got done at the dairy milking in the morning. That was just the way it was, because it is one of those jobs that just doesn't ever stop.
1,800. I mean, and that's in 2 facilities.
That's on a single facility.
Wow.
It's a lot of cows.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, when you think about what it costs just to feed that many, and they're producing a lot of milk, right? So how do
Mhm.
you feed them? What do they normally eat? Are they on alfalfa all day long? What do you give something that's producing that much milk?
Yeah, dairy cows are really unique. Like very, I think the more I learn about beef from Natalie and just comparing and contrasting, dairy cows are very unique with their diet because we need to be able to give them enough to produce milk. I mean, they produce a lot of milk throughout the day. So we actually have a nutritionist that plans their diets, and it is called a total mixed ration. So it is not one single ingredient. We have what's called a commodity area, and it is basically like a pantry. Every single stall or bin is some kind of different food for the cows from, people think about feeding corn to cows. I mean, one of the ingredients is called corn silage. It's where we chop the entire plant, corn, leaves, stem, all of it, and put that in the cow's diet, as you said, alfalfa. And then they also eat a lot of byproducts, which I hate that word, but I mean, there's not really a better word for it. But essentially, one of the really cool things about cattle is that they can take leftover products and upcycle them into meat and dairy. So you have, waste from ethanol plants, like the production or distillers grains. You can have waste from breweries. When you make cotton, there's a seed left over called cottonseed. We can feed that to our cows. So all sorts of different things that we feed to our cows. That's all planned by our nutritionist.
So yeah, it's funny because the first thing that comes to mind is whenever you start talking about cattle, whether it's beef cattle or dairy cattle, the vegans and PETA and all these groups, they want to tell everyone what's wrong with it, right? They'll say, "Oh, you don't understand. They're treating these animals poorly," and that's not what I'm hearing here. You have a pantry. You have a pantry for your cattle. I mean, I'm sure it doesn't look like my pantry or your pantry, but you have a pantry. I mean, and you have people taking care, knowing that the nutrition for these cattle are correct. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much care that goes into our cows. I mean, I would say it's easily the number one priority on a dairy farm is cow comfort. The more comfortable a cow is, the more relaxed she is, the more milk she'll produce. So if you come at it just from, say, an economic standpoint, it makes more sense for that cow to be healthy, comfortable, relaxed. And then on top of that, obviously, we're people who enjoy working with cattle and working with livestock and animals, and it's an integral part of our life. I always joke that my backyard is basically a close-up pen. So that's where the cows, will give birth. It's called close-up because we keep them up close to the barns. We can keep a better eye on them. And then obviously we have a really great team supporting us on the dairy as well. I mean, you don't milk 1,800 cows by yourself. So having a really great team in place is great. We have a vet that comes out once a week and does herd health checks. I mean, there's a lot that goes into, producing milk.
When we go to the store, companies take great pride in letting us know where the food came from. These cows grazed on grass. And I guess this is a question for both Natalie, you and Tara. We see, we don't have our cattle just hooked up to machinery all day. They get to graze around, and hey, we have free range chickens, and everything is now, some kind of marketing tool. And I'm asking both, and either one of you can start. What's the truth behind that? Do these cows get to go out, or are they just the way that the PETA people would tell us, they're just sitting there clamped in all day long? I can't imagine an animal just being clamped in all day long with something hooked to their teeth.
Yeah,
What's
so
the truth
I'll
behind all of that?
I'll go first, and
The day in the life.
I'll let Natalie go follow me. But no, our cows we do not graze our cows. We'll graze some of our heifers, so cows that have not yet calved. So our younger cows, we'll graze them sometimes. But it is not the way that PETA makes it out to be. It's big, large, open corrals that our cows are in, essentially. And they actually go to the barn twice a day to be milked, and they get milked for 8 minutes each time. So it's about 16 minutes a day that they get milked in total. So very different picture than what PETA paints, for sure. But Natalie, on the flip side, is all about grazing. So,
You asked you kind of talked about labels there. And I want to say that I think labels started out with a really good intention. And I think now, to answer your question, they are at a point where they are a marketing tactic for someone to purchase something. And I think we have really lost sight of the meaning of them, what it actually means for the consumer, what it actually means for the producer. Like both ends of the spectrum, I think, are kind of getting the short end of the deal now when it comes to labels. But yeah, diving into what a cow's life looks in the beef side of it, something that a lot of listeners may not know if they're unlike you, Vinnie, and did not grow up next door to a farm, is that the beef industry is really segmented. And unfortunately, animal proteins get lumped together. So chicken, pigs, and beef, everyone thinks that they're kind of raised the same, or they talk about them the same interchangeably. And that is not true. Chickens and pork are vertically integrated. So it's a very, very different system than what the beef system looks like in the United States.
Explain that. Give us a lesson on vertically integrated.
Yeah, vertically integrated is basically it can be owned by the same person from the start to finish. So a very common example would be Tyson. Tyson would own the chicken from the egg all the way to the very end at the plant that you're getting in the store. Tyson owns it. It's vertically integrated. Lots of times it's, just it's very clean. It can be in the same place. It's just very structured. There's not a lot of change of ownership. It's one person. That could not be further from what happens in the beef industry. It is very segmented. It is actually, changes hands 3 to 4 times before it actually gets to the end phase. And that's from family to family, essentially. It starts out on a family like mine, which is what is called cow-calf for people. Mm-hmm. It's the industry term. And that is basically when you think of raising a baby up until like a teenage stage, if we're thinking about it in human terms. Very easy terminology for listeners. That's what me and my husband do. The baby and the mom is out together, out at pasture grazing, and they're together until it's time to wean them, that teenage phase. And again, that would change ownership. It goes to a different family. They buy it. There's an exchange of money. It is not the same people. And that's usually like a background or a stalker phase. And then that can, again, they're raising that animal till a certain weight usually, which then it goes to the feedlot if it's being, finished traditionally, like a conventional.
Right.
And then it goes to the packers. So there's a lot of steps and changes that happen in the beef segment. And I don't think people are aware of that. I think they see the big bad feedlots like you talked about. That PETA would paint, they pan over all these cattle out at the feedlot and they say, cows are killing the environment, but they don't leave out that is for about 4 months, 4 to 6 months. 6 months is probably a better number for an average that they're at the feedlot stage. And before that, they're out at pasture. 2/3 of an animal's life, if it's a beef cattle, is out at pasture. And so I think it's very skewed, the beef industry.
Yeah, our neighbors, the Roberts, and they're still in the business. They would fatten the cat, so they would get the teenagers and fatten them because Louisiana, you have a lot of lush grass, and it's easy to fatten cattle there, right? Mm-hmm. So they would buy them I don't think people really understand this. You buy them based on weight, right? So it's a certain weight. When you get it, it's in your best interest to treat this animal really, really well so it can gain a lot of weight, right? So you're treating it well. I remember when we would go help them, bring the cat, you'd have to bring them in, get them through a chute and worm them, get, vitamins in them and do all this stuff. I used to go play cowboy on the weekends. It wasn't work when you're a kid. It's like, oh my God, I get to throw on my Justins and Wranglers and go play cowboy for the weekend. All the girls are going to think I'm super cool. Are you kidding?
I thought my husband was super cool.
Yeah. I mean, that was my weekend on the quarter horse, just, doing that stuff because it was fun when you're a kid. We got to ride those horses whenever we wanted, but when it came time to bring cattle in, it's like, no, we need a few cattle hands, right? Just drive them in. So they would do that. And I never saw one cow ever get abused. Not once.
Yeah, I mean, there's no really point that we would, like you said, and like Tara said too, I mean, you can come at it from 2 ways. If you're coming at it from an economic standpoint, if you're coming at it from a business standpoint, my husband and I are in the business of raising really good cattle, something that we, our name is on those cattle when they go into the sale barn. Our name is on that cattle when someone goes to buy it from us. It's a representation of our work and who we are as people. If we put not looking good animal out there, not only one, is it a poor representation of our ranch, but 2, it is not going to bring us a very good return on our dollar. Like we're not very good business people. We're not very good ranchers. And then like Tara said, my husband is one of those people that have been from the day, he was 4 years old, he knew he wanted to raise cattle. I mean, he loves cows. He truly is so passionate about cattle. That is what he's always wanted to do. That is what he does. So usually if you're in this business, you enjoy being outside, you enjoy working with animals. So there's not really a reason why we would not strive to have the best animal welfare you could on your own ranch or farm.
Yeah. And look, I've had the great Dr. Temple Grandin on this show. And, over the years, she's done more to help, the welfare,
Yeah,
of it all. Go on.
Yeah, I was going to say she's a real trailblazer, and she's done some phenomenal work for, increasing the welfare standards and teaching people about, basic things that are very small, but can make a big difference. And again, very common name in the industry that a lot of ranchers and farmers are taking her advice and implementing so that, again, the cattle remain healthy, calm, and are just a good product.
Yeah. Go on.
Animal welfare has never been better than it is now. Like Natalie and I both feel that way from dairy to beef. From my lifetime, Natalie's, like, we are doing really great things and we're constantly striving to be better, which I think is something that's like important for people to know, because it's just such a different picture painted online.
Yeah. I was just doing a podcast, a Monday show with Anna right before the mics went hot for this. And, I was telling her, and she didn't even know about this. They're getting ready to kill a couple of 100,000 cattle. Are you guys familiar with this? Is it Ireland?
Yeah, it's in Ireland. We're actually going to cover that story this week on Discover Ag.
Yeah, I'm thinking about if I can get this podcast moved up to next week, because you guys are like a month down the road. This is happening right now. This is based on no science whatsoever. This is based on the fact that we came up with this term that somehow ruminants are somehow killing the planet, which makes zero sense. Because if you just take the United States and look at the number of buffalo that roam, the bison that roams, is greater than the number of cattle we have right now. So if we were killing the planet with methane from ruminants, the planet should have been in bad shape back in 1865, but it wasn't, right?
Yeah.
So this makes no sense what they're doing. And by the way, last time I checked, a deer is a ruminant. Do we go kill Bambi too? Do we take out 200,000 Bambis? Because I'll start right now. I got a rifle hanging on that wall. I'll go grab it because there's deer running in my backyard right now. My Vishla chases them every day, right? So should I go shoot Bambi? Is that a good idea? And not eat it, just kill it, right? No grilling, just killing. Is it okay for me to do that? The answer is no. So why would we take a fictitious problem, a problem that does not exist, and tell a country mandates that they're going to kill 200,000? Let's get into it. Either one of you can start.
You're exactly right. I really believe we're going to look back in history books at this time and era, and this will be one of the greatest marketing scams that has ever been pulled, is this idea that, ruminants, cows, because that's the ruminant that's getting blamed, essentially, that cows are bad for the planet. I believe we will look back at that and not even comprehend how we convinced so many people to believe something that could not be further from the truth. You absolutely nailed it on the head. Why do I never
You never can remember things. Hit the nail on the head.
You absolutely hit the nail on the head with the ruminant comparison between bison and cattle. They almost come out comparable in numbers. I think cattle's actually just a little bit shorter of comparing to the max amount of bison we had at one point. And it's crazy that they're villainized, because if you actually get into the flip side of the coin, there are very positive, beneficial things that ruminants do when they're out at pasture, out at grasslands, out in nature, that is a natural part of the ecosystem that is needed to maintain it. So it's pretty crazy where we are right now.
Sheep. Should we kill sheep? Should we kill goats? American bison? Domestic buffalo? Moose?
Elk.
You have a lot of that where you used to live, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yak. You want to kill a yak? Reindeer? White-tailed deer, these are all ruminants, folks. People think, oh, ruminants, that's a cow. They call them ruminants. No, this is a type of animal. This is the way their system works. And they all have that same methane coming out at the same rate. As a matter of fact, I'm going to throw this out to the audience here. You guys tell me, do you know the number one animal to release methane in the world? Any guesses? Tara? Nothing?
Are you
I was
counting?
going to say maybe people. Like I
was-
guess it's the 9 billion people that are belching and farting everywhere.
Well, the way we're eating now with all the carbohydrates, yeah, probably. But no, there's an animal that
Oh, isn't it like the termite or something?
a
Like,
termite, yeah. Did
yes.
you hear that on my podcast, or where did you hear that?
No,
about
Natalie
all the
told me
time.
that the other day.
Yeah, it's a termite. It's a
Yeah.
termite. I live next door to a wood expert. The guy's written like 10 or 12 books on, he's a tenured professor from UVA. He's one of the foremost authorities on trees and wood around the world. And we were having a scotch one night, and we were talking about different animals and the whole thing and ruminants and all that. And he goes, well, the termite puts out more methane than any other animal, because think about it. The world is full of trees. There's termites everywhere. So those little tiny termite farts are putting out more methane than all the ruminants put together. I might be exaggerating at that point, but you get the point, right?
Yeah, I mean, the energy sector, the numbers are almost comparable for methane output between, agriculture and the energy sector, and also rice. Rice is a huge one. And people loved it. I actually follow a very interesting account. He's from Africa, and he is a big proponent for fossil fuels in Africa to advance, obviously, that country. And we got into a Twitter thread together. It was a fun one, defending agriculture and methane in cattle. And he was talking about how I think he quoted 12% of methane comes from rice production, but it is about 25%, or at least over 20% of calories needed, globally. And so, I mean, you have to consider other things than just, we need to lower methane and we're going to cut this, right? I mean, there's a lot to consider when you look at, energy releasing methane, rice releasing methane, humans and landfills releasing methane, and cattle releasing methane. There are pros and cons. It's a very nuanced conversation, and we have a very laser focused, tunnel vision on just methane, cutting it, end of story. And we're not even considering anything else that goes along with it.
Well, and we haven't even started talking about the fact, like, okay, so we cut all these cattle. What does that do to our diet? The
Right.
problems and repercussions from that, like if quote unquote this made our diets more sustainable, which I think we can all agree it doesn't, why do you want a sustainable diet that doesn't actually contain any nutrients, or is not like a nutrient rich product? Like, that's what these ruminants give us, is a very nutrient rich food source.
Well, look, I was just talking about this on the last podcast with Anna, because we were talking, we have new audience all the time, and people want to know where the term fuck quinoa came from, which I'm in the Urban Dictionary for that. That was the first entry for me. And I said, well, somehow when you tell people not to eat sugars and grains, they'll go, well, what about quinoa? That's like a superfood, right? Because it's got more protein than any other, grain that we eat. And yeah, okay. So we looked it up just a little while ago, and I still have this sheet of paper right in front of me. So I'll just do it again right now for this audience, which will probably see it before that audience. A cup of cooked quinoa has 8 grams of protein, right? We looked at a pound of beef, but then we took it and we said, okay, let's bring it down. A pound of beef had like 65 grams of protein. Would you agree with that, Natalie? You're in the beef business.
I plead the fifth.
Okay. So we looked it up. According to the government, a pound of beef has 65 grams of protein or thereabouts. So actually it said 67. We brought it down to 65. So I said, okay, let's just compare that to a cup of quinoa. Let's bring it down to 1/3. and 1/3 would come to 21 grams of protein. Now, do you know how much carbohydrates is in a piece of meat? You want to take this one, Tara?
I don't know how many. But gosh, I should have like brushed up on my beef nutrition before we jumped on here.
I'm going to help you. 0.
I was
Okay,
gonna say,
that's
not
what
very
I
many.
figured, but I was like, I feel like this is a trick question, but I assumed 0.
Yeah. So it's 0. So in meat, you get 21 grams out of 1/3 pound of beef. You get 21 grams of protein, 0 carbohydrates. Out of 8 grams, out of 1 cup of cooked quinoa, you get 8 grams of protein, but you get 39 grams of carbohydrates. 32 of those 39 is starch. So you're getting more carbohydrates than you will get from a 12-ounce Coke per cup of quinoa to get those 8 valuable grams of protein. So in other words, in order to even get close to the meat, you would have to eat 3 cups or close to 120 grams of carbohydrates. And here's the kicker. Animal protein has all of the amino acids we need in concert, right? The proteins you get from vegetation, and not really vegetation, grains, which is barely a vegetation, right? It's not supposed to eat this stuff. You're not getting the full profile of amino acids. That's where the problem is. Do you see where we are here? Go on. You look like you want to say something, Allie.
I was just going to say, we actually talked about this in depth in a recent podcast episode we did where we debunked Game Changers, and we brought on a registered dietitian, and we talked about these exact same things. She highlights the inefficiencies in the incomplete proteins of animal and also in the absorption. You can't absorb at the same rate. And she threw out some numbers that I'm not going to quote on this one, but she talked about the difference between them, animal and protein in that episode. And then we did the same exercise because Game Changers talked about that you could eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I think it was. I know it was some type of peanut butter sandwich with a steak, and they kind of tried to do the same thing, pull your wool over your eyes and say that you can get the same amount of protein. And she went through it all and she said, well, sure, yeah, eventually, but here's how many calories you're going to be eating. Here's how many you'll have to eat. They love to do that. It's what New York's doing with the signs where they do in the school system, where they do broccoli and beef, that you can eat as much broccoli and get the same amount of protein as you can beef. Yeah. If you want to eat how many ever cups of broccoli it is, which I don't think many kids want to do that.
It's almost a bushel. I'm not being funny.
No,
it's a lot, right?
Yeah. It's
a lot of broccoli you would have to eat. I love broccoli. Wait, Bonzo, don't lick that. This very nice woman, Rose Dobbins, did an oil painting of my 2 Visualas. And I have it now on the floor here because I held it up here. I'll show it to you guys. You guys have to see this. Hang on. Look at this. See if I can sit back. Look at this.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
And the one that
very beautiful.
the darker dog, the one that's not so old, is now licking it.
He's very taken with himself, his self-portrait.
They would look great on your Montana hunting cabin, right on the deck of it.
Well, if you saw this room outside of what's behind me, it looks like before you guys go, I'll turn the cameras around after we turn this off, and I'll show you what this room looks like. It looks like a Montana hunting cabin in here. I'm an old soul that I love hunting, fishing, outdoor sports, and that's just me. But yeah, getting back to it, Natalie, you're absolutely right. We're not getting the proper amount of nutrients in the correct way. And that dietitian was 100% right. I debunked, as you know, Game Changers for a bit in my last movie, Beyond Impossible, because people need to hear the truth. They don't need to hear propaganda bullshit. Right. And that's where we are now. It's like, well, it's got to be true. Someone put in a movie called Game Changers. So that means it's true. Right. It's crazy what we're going through. Go on.
I was just going to say, we talked about the same thing on the podcast last week. There was an article written, it was an expose opinion piece in the New York Times, maybe, or Washington Post, one of the two. I can't quite remember. But it was written from someone removed from agriculture. His platform is he's built around reducitarian. So he is calling for the reduction of meat, not the, absolute void of it. But he wrote this article about factory farming and how the only generation that can end it is Gen Z. And he's had claims in there, and we talk about this. Tara points it out that he writes as if it's a matter of fact. He writes these things that are not true as if they are a statement. And if you are reading that piece and you don't know the truth, you read it as if, oh, okay, it's common knowledge. That's what the sentence says. It's common knowledge now that, animal agriculture is destroying the planet. If you don't know any better, if you're young, if you look up to the art writer or, whatever it is, you read that and you think, okay, it's common knowledge. I'm just going to go live my life and make every choice in my life that is affected by this now, believing this statement that is completely inaccurate.
A truer statement has never been said. I mean, look, when you have alliterations like meat is murder, and you have the governor of or the mayor of New York City saying meatless Mondays. By the way, guys, I don't talk politics on this show because I don't like politics. I don't even talk about them in my life outside of this show. I don't care if you're on the right or the left. Do whatever you want. I'm good. That's not my thing. But during the last election cycle, we knew that, the incumbent, Donald Trump, was going to run again. So all eyes were set on the Democrats. Who are they going to run? Right. And I showed a little bit of this in my movie. So I'm looking, I want to see who the candidates are. Well, who are they going to run? At the time, and it's laughable, I was going, oh, Joe Biden is too old. He'll never be the president. But we have this guy and that guy and the other guy, and let's see what they have to say. And one of them came out, one of them was a vegan, and said, well, if I become president, I'm going to make sure that meat is gone. Right. I think it was Cory Booker. Was that his name? Booker.
Mm-hmm, Cory Booker.
If I'm president, meat is out of here. And I was like, wait, what? Huh? So I looked him up. I went, who this Cory Booker guy is? It's like, oh, he's a vegan. So I get it. I get Cory saying that because this is part of who he is. And I think whoever's president should try to bring whatever they, we get their flavor, their stink, right? But then someone was asking Kamala Harris, hey, Cory Booker says we shouldn't have meat in schools and we should get rid of meat and meat is murder. What do you think? And she goes, yeah, I think that's a good idea. That's fine. Yeah, I'm good with that. So you see, once one person says it, everyone else follows along. And I'm not saying this against the left. I'm sure if it was on the right and somebody would have said it, somebody else would have said, yeah, it sounds good. You see, one hears it and then the next one, they just perpetuate it. We get a 14-year-old girl to go in front of adults and say, how dare you, how dare you, how dare you? And we hold this kid up as a hero. No one looked at this kid's parents and said, I think Greta Thunberg's parents should be shot for putting this kid out there, right? We all know, they told us that she has some kind of disability, some kind of mental, I don't know what it is. I'm not an expert, right? But who puts this kid in front of people and do that to him? What kind of animal does that? Well, I guess Greta's parents do. And we're sitting there, it's like, oh, so this is what we are. Let's get a young lady who doesn't really know what she's doing to go up there and do this and cry in front and tell the adults they're wrong. Is that a world you want to live in? Either of you both have kids, right?
Yep.
You want your kid to show up and go, how dare you? How dare you, Mom? How dare you ruin the world for me? Does that sound normal?
It's
No.
pretty crazy where we are. There's actually an article we just found. We haven't covered it on the podcast yet, but I want to, we plan to. There's an LA teen suing their school district over milk in the school system. I mean, I feel like we have really lost touch with some things, with some generations. And you actually highlight this in your film as well, but you talk about, climate anxiety and, this led by Greta Thunberg and what it's doing to our youth, essentially. And part of it, I really worry that we are brainwashing a certain generation into believing something that will have nutritional effects on them, mental effects on them. I mean, I have read articles. I kind of dived into this climate anxiety thing a little bit, and there are kids who have some very doomsday feelings and statements, and I don't think they're creating them. I think they actually feel that way, and it is pretty crazy that a youth could go through life feeling that apprehensive about, adding children into the world, or whether the planet's still going to be alive in 20 years. So it doesn't even matter. I mean, we're at a pretty crazy place in our society right now, I think, when it comes to everyone's fixation on the climate and what they need to do to fix it.
Well, look, this is not new. When I was a kid, back, let's call it 1971, 72, a lot of hippies. They were protesting the war. In 1968, 69, the first time I saw a naked woman was Woodstock, because those pictures were around. I was like, wait a minute. Those dudes have boobs, and I don't even know what boobs are yet because I'm naked. But you understand, it's like Woodstock was a thing. And when I was a kid, we thought hippies were cool because they were like cool adults with long hair and stuff. And they were all they same stuff they're talking about now, right? The only problem is not everybody had a 2x4-inch piece of glass that they're staring into every day. As a matter of fact, I talk about this a lot on the show. This is a major part of the problem right here. It is. And the reason it's a major part of the problem is because they're looking at American. I want to see if you guys can answer this. Do you know what the average screen time is for Americans on a phone right now?
Isn't it like 8 hours a day or something? It's like
I think it's
as much
more.
as a
I think it's
workday.
like 12 or something.
It's 8. It's 8 hours and 7 minutes.
Wow.
I looked it up a couple of days ago. And then I was like, wait a minute. I want to see how I compare to that. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have to take into account, I use my phone for work. So I go check my Twitter and answer every question that I can reasonably answer. I answer most of my Instagram questions because I'm trying to help people, right? And whenever we do a lot of filming on these phones, and that's called FaceTime too, right? Because you don't just see FaceTime, it'll tell you where you spend the time. The time is spent getting stuff ready for YouTube and getting stuff ready for Instagram and using it for Instagram and Twitter and the whole thing. With all of that, I'm still into 3 hours a day. And I think I'm on that phone it's like, it drives me nuts. Whenever I don't have to have that thing in my hand, it's not in my hand. Because for me, that thing is work. And I feel like I'm on that thing too much of the day. And that's only 2 hours, and I think I average 2 hours and 50 minutes or something like that every week. Either of you have your phone there?
Yes.
See where you are, Tara, if you don't mind. Do you mind saying where you are?
I know where mine's at. Mine, I just checked mine, but I skew mine really weird. I either read or watch something as I fall asleep. I know it's terrible, but I end up with really high numbers because my phone gets left on all night. But mine, when I don't do that, it typically is I'm right at the 8 hours, which to me feels crazy. But similar to you, I work on my phone a ton. But you have inspired me. I'm going to try to get it down much lower because you work on your phone too, and your number is obviously way lower than mine.
Yeah, we shoot whole videos and everything on it. Natalie, you're looking down at something. Are you looking down at your phone?
Well, I'm trying to see my screen time use here.
Do you know how to get to it?
Yeah, I think I'm getting close.
Okay, yeah. You just go under, I don't even know what it's called. You go under settings or something and it tells you right away. It's right there.
Mine says 7 hours.
Yeah, so you guys are about the average. All right,
Yeah.
so think about that. Think about that. These kids are growing up not experiencing the world, okay? If you sleep 8 hours a night, another half of your life, another 1/3 of your life, 8 hours, is looking at this thing and you're living this thing. And if this thing keeps telling you the world's going to end, you have to kill cattle and not eat them, just kill them. And they show you a polar bear floating on a piece of ice out in Alaska, and that polar bear is going to die unless you kill a cow over in Ireland later today. When you start putting that together, and that's in your face all day long, right? That's all you know. And you know that from the time you can know anything, right? I remember we were in a restaurant, we were still living in California. And the table next to us, there was like a 2, maybe 3-year-old, a toddler. And the toddler had an iPad. What's it called? The bigger looking phone, the iPad.
Yeah, the iPad.
And the kid is on the iPad, and Serena and I were sitting at the next table. We kept looking over. The parents thought that we were impressed that their kid knew. Like, oh yeah, on the iPad all day long. They loves the iPad. Parents started bragging about it. Look at our 2-year-old can be on an iPad. And I wanted to go over there and strangle these women. Are you fucking kidding me? Is this a joke? You're happy because your kid is looking at a piece of glass and not experiencing the world around them? It's nuts.
Another point to this conversation that we haven't talked about that you do mention in your movie that I really appreciated is like the pop culture phenomena that is like going vegan, giving up meat, taking a stand to like fix climate change, quote unquote. And so then, you add in all of that 8 hours a day, these kids are looking at that. And not only are they looking at their screen, but people they really look up to are telling them all of these things that they need to, do. And you have people telling them things that have no business really being in the space of giving nutrition advice, giving farming advice, giving environmental advice. And it really does create for just, a world that I don't think I want to know always what it's going to look like in 10 and 20 years.
Yeah, if we think it's weird now, it's not going to get better. That's the crazy part, right?
Yes.
It's going in a weird direction. We have some bad air quality here right now because apparently there's something burning over in Canada. Are you guys getting any of that where you are? Or is that just over here?
We did at one point, which is pretty crazy. I was obviously, when I lived in Montana, very used to, fire season in the summers and getting drift from whether it's a Montana fire or Canada fire. But I have never, since I lived in Nebraska, I've never experienced, fire from that far away. And we had it, I don't know, within the last month, probably.
Yeah, it's weird because my mom called me from Louisiana and she goes, "Hey, we're watching the news over here and we're understanding that around your area, there's some smoke in the air." And I was like, yeah. And again, I lived in California for 31 years. So we had the fires every August. It was like clockwork. I said, yeah, it's a little hazy out here. She goes, "Are you wearing a mask?" They're suggesting a mask on television. And I said, "Ma, you see, that's the problem. They fucking got us started on these masks." I said, do you think a mask is going to keep smoke out? That's insane, right? It's an insane thought.
I will say my little plug for cattle right now. One of the positive things we do is help mitigate wildfires. If you can get an animal out there grazing, they take a lot of that. They eat down that fuel. I mean, that's one of California's problem. They won't allow the grazing. And that's why California has had such fires.
Yeah, no, it is nuts. I could sit here and talk about this stuff all day. There are a couple of questions. People ask me about this all the time. And I have some answers for them, but not all the answers. They'll say, "Hey, I got a middle class, got 3 kids, trying to feed a family, can't really afford organic meat, grass raised, grass finished. What's the truth behind that?" And I give them my version of the truth. I never talk about it on the show because I don't know how true my truth is, right? What's the truth behind? First off, I tell everyone, the one thing I'm sure about is bullshit on organic. I don't even know what that means when it comes to meat. But when it comes to grass raised, I know they're all grass raised because I watched the Roberts do it next to us, right? But I know that most of them are grain finished. That's how you get that marbling done at the end. What's the truth behind organic, grass raised, pasture raised, what is it? Where are we on this stuff?
Yeah. So for organic, I'll start with that. I think one thing is people think organic is like a health claim, that the product is more healthy. And really, organic is more about the farming practices. So there's different farming practices. If you're organic, if you're certified organic, you have regulations by USDA you have to follow to get that certification. And it's, on the dairy side, the cattle have to graze for so many, days out of the year. And they can't use antibiotics. And then the antibiotic conversation is obviously a whole nother conversation. I mean, a vet prescribes antibiotics on our farm. It's not like it's like a rampant use, as again, the media and activists like to portray. And then on the grass finish side, Natalie, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you are choosing or looking to choose a piece of meat based off of nutrition value, there really isn't a lot of reasons to choose grass-fed, grass-finished over grain-finished, the conventional. The nutritional, I mean, a piece of meat is a piece of meat. You can get into like the omegas and stuff, which Vinnie, I'm sure you have touched on and shared before. But if you are looking and want to make a stink about the omegas, then you should be having a different diet. Like, it's not where you're getting it from your meat. It's from salmon and a lot of other things. So it's very negligible to say I'm going to choose grass, finished over grain finished because I need those omegas. So I personally, you're right on the organic when it comes to beef. If that label's on there, it basically means that probably the animal didn't get a GMO finished, grain or corn. So if that is something that you as a consumer care a lot about, GMO, then the organic label makes choice. But if that is not something you care about, then the organic label really doesn't make sense when it comes to beef. All natural is not even a regulated term. So if you see that on a beef label, I don't actually know what that means. If you see no antibiotics, pretty much all beef has no antibiotics. There is a withdrawal period before they enter the, packing plant. There is a test. They're testing at the packing plant. So pretty much everything on the shelf is going to have no antibiotics. They will say, I mean, I can't speak to grocery store labels, no antibiotics, but I will say, if you were doing like a direct to consumer, buying from a local ranch, or farmer, and they say no antibiotics, that means that they probably, if they had to treat an animal with antibiotics, they moved that out of the portion of the herd that they put into beef. So none of the animals truly got antibiotics. Whereas if you're getting no antibiotic in the grocery store, the animal could have, but that goes through a safety withdrawal period. So that would be one label difference there. But other than that, like, labels on beef, I think are pretty misleading. Grass-fed can actually mean grain is in it because you have to really look for the finish label. I mean, it's just kind of a lot of baloney. I really stand by the fact that, all beef is healthy. All beef is safe. If you truly care about your beef and wanting to support a U.S. rancher or wanting to know some of these things, find a local farmer and rancher. That's the answer to it. Otherwise, go to the grocery store and pick whichever one you want. Pick the lowest priced one if that's the one you want, but they're going to be pretty comparable.
And on the milk side with the antibiotics, I'll add that every single tanker of milk that leaves a farm is tested for antibiotics to the part per trillion. And if it came back like with antibiotics in it, which is extremely rare that ever happens, all of the milk gets dumped and the farmer has to pay for it. So there's they are extremely strict regulations and checks and balances. And as Natalie said, like, if we treat a cow on our dairy with antibiotics, there is a withhold or withdrawal period where that milk does not enter the food supply system at all. She's milked separately until it has been so many days past her last dose of antibiotics before she's able to re-enter the milking herd for human consumption. So there's just so many checks and balances in place that I think people can feel really good about whether they're picking conventional or organic at the grocery store. As Natalie said, it comes down to what your choices are, what's important to you. I personally buy, the regular conventional milk on the grocery store shelf, and I know and feel great about the quality standards and the nutritional profile.
Yeah, I'm always trying to explain it to people that say, "Oh, milk has antibiotics." It's like, no, that's vegan folklore. They've been saying that forever. You can't sell it that way. And the other thing is, clear this up for me, Tara. I've always heard that, people say, "Oh, this milk came from this farm, that milk came from that farm." Doesn't it all end up in a processing plant and your milk goes in with someone else's milk and it's all mixed together? Or how does that work?
Yeah, so the tanker leaves my farm with just our milk in the tanker. And then when it gets to processing, it's put in like a large silo or like a stainless steel container, essentially huge, then all the milk would be mixed together. So that's why you test every tanker before it leaves the farm, so that you have exactly that farm's quality assurance for that particular farm. And then, it'll go to the processor. Milk is typically a very local product. So it typically, if you're just buying regular milk on the shelf, it comes from a farm less than 100 miles from that grocery store. And it takes less than 48 hours to get from the farm to the grocery store shelf.
So it's that fresh. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask this, and I'm going to be jealous if the answer is what I want it to be. You ever just take raw milk there yourself and then make your own cream? Or you guys do any of that just on the side to get that fresh and then make it double? You can make double cream. There's no carrageenan, which is another question I want to ask you about. But do you guys do that?
So I drank raw milk almost my entire life until I was about 25 when I was pregnant with my first daughter. And my husband and I ultimately decided to just go with pasteurized, homogenized milk. But every once in a while we'll get some, and we'll especially with the girls, my girls home for the summer, we'll make butter out of, raw milk. It's fun. It's different. I mean, when you drink raw milk, another piece is it's not just pasteurized. Store milk is also homogenized, so it stays all the same consistency, whereas raw milk will separate the cream on top from the rest of it. So if you have raw milk in your fridge, you have to shake the bottle before you pour the milk on your cereal. Otherwise, you will end up with very heavy cream instead of milk.
Yeah, clumpy cereal.
Yeah.
But no, I love that. And again, growing up in the country, none of that exists out there anymore. When I was a kid, it was out there, now it just doesn't exist. And I was wondering, it's God, I bet they get some of that heavy cream. Why do they, when you get the stuff at the store, and you might not know this answer because you're not on that end of the business, but they have to you get cream, and the reason it's creamier is because they put thickeners in it. They put carrageenan and other sorts in it. What is that? Why do they do it?
So there is nothing added to regular milk. The only ingredient is
no, not regular milk, but when you get heavy cream.
Oh, heavy cream. I don't know. I know that for USDA there is standard. So you have full fat milk. Most people don't know this is full fat milk is actually 3.25%. And so that's a standardized. And then for 2%, it's 2% milk. And then obviously down from there. And so a lot of it has to do with the standardization of what the solids have to be versus all the other components.
That's interesting because I always thought that whole milk was 4%. So it's even less than that.
It is less than that. And that's one of those standardized things that is set by the USDA. I think you can get heavier cream, some of the glass bottles, some of the specialty milks will have something a little bit different, extra cream or cream on top.
Yeah.
And that will be a little bit different, but standardized whole milk is in that 3% to 4% range. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You always wonder these questions, but you never know, how that works or whatever. So what we learned today is that the carbon footprint of beef and also dairy is not what they're saying it is. Is that a yes or no? Where are we on that?
Yeah, so the U.S. For animal agriculture in the U.S., it's about 4% of total greenhouse gas emissions for all of animal ag. So that's beef, hogs, poultry, dairy, all of it. Dairy, I think, is about 2% or a little bit less. Natalie, I don't know if you have a beef specific one. So you're talking a very, very small percentage of total greenhouse gas emissions. And you have to keep that into consideration with how much of our nutrients are being supplied by that 4%.
I think the other interesting thing of that is I think all of agriculture as a whole is 11%. So you're looking about 5 for animal, 5 for plants.
Right.
And I think the vegans, you're mad at the animal side of it, which has the same footprint of the plant side that you're advocating for. It just doesn't really make sense to me.
And a fun fact is agriculture and forestry are actually a carbon sink. So they remove more carbon from the atmosphere than they put in. They actually remove about 12% and they account for about 11% of emissions. So they actually are removing an extra 1%.
Yeah, I think, go on.
I was just saying that's something that no one talks about is the positive side of agriculture. So yes, we have a carbon footprint. Tara and I do not deny that. We're going to, any industry, right, is going to have an extract from it. That's not the right way to say it, but So one, the question is like, what's the percentage we should be striving for, right? What is the acceptable percentage that your food industry that feeds, nationwide 330 million people globally, is it 8 billion or 9 billion people? What's the acceptable percentage for us to have to give everyone that food? But two, no one talks about the positive things that we're doing, right? Tara talked earlier about byproducts. There is a study out there that shows that if cattle did not consume all of those byproducts, they would have to be disposed of, right? So best case scenario, they get composted. The greenhouse gas emissions of those industries would increase 5 times if cattle don't consume them. If they go to a landfill, which is probably the more logical thing that's going to happen to them in our nation, it's increased by 49 times. So cattle are actually reducing the carbon footprint of other industries, and we don't get credit for that. We don't get credit for maintaining grasslands. We don't get credit for natural fertilization. I mean, there's a lot of things that the ag industry is doing that's positive. We don't even get credit for all of the byproducts that we use in our everyday lives that come from animals. I mean, we're in tires, we're in air filters, we're in crayons. I mean, if you knocked out animal contribution to society as a whole, I don't think you realize how many touch points it is in your life that came from, the nose to tail of an animal. Like we would have a lot of ripples effects if we actually got rid of animal agriculture, which some of these crazy activists are wanting.
Yeah, look, I make no bones about it. I mean, I have a shearling coat sitting right over there, right? Even though it's summertime, that thing hangs on that rack year round. I think about it. I have 2 or 3 shearling coats, and more Lucchese's than probably both of you and your husbands put together. I've been collecting for a long time. There's a lot of leather around here, and when you think about it, and that's just a simple byproduct. So that's not even. I think, both of our cars have leather interiors, leather seats. And you don't think about that, but that stuff holds up a lot better than a cloth seat where you have to go manufacture that, right? And there's greenhouse gases there. I don't think people realize. Go on.
I was going to say the second greatest scam is vegan leather. If you want to put me on a soapbox about, distorting the truth
I do.
to someone,
go right ahead.
I mean, that's basically petroleum, right? I mean, that is what vegan leather is. So it's plastics, and they marketing has positioned people to be proud to say, I have vegan leather sneakers and I am buying vegan leather bags and any, whatever it is. And at the root of it, if they really cared about environmental sustainability, that's the worst thing they could do is have, the quote unquote vegan leather, the plastics. It's like, we're already using an animal for meat. It's just very, very sustainable to take the leather or, the hide from it to make the leather. And yet that's the thing that society looks at and says, shame on you for doing that. Let's go manufacture it, create it, slap a label on it, and then everyone can be proud of that and do that instead.
No, look, veganism is not really an export outside of the West. You have to be a vegan, you have to have a lot of money. Bottom line. I mean, poor countries, if you said, look, these people are purposely not eating meat, and then we sit around and go, wait a minute, why does everyone want us dead? It's because we're that fucking stupid. Right? They're looking around going, I always say this, can you imagine? You go to a third world country and you'll say, yeah, they got a lot of cattle over there in America. What do they do with them? Well, they're not eating them anymore. As a matter of fact, they don't want anyone to eat them. Why not? We don't know. They just want people to eat vegetation, and they have cattle everywhere. And then you tell the third world country guys, like, this is what Americans do. They hire someone to come over and cut their grass. They pay someone to do that. And then that same American goes to a building. They call it a gym. Starts with a G, but they call it a gym. Gymnasium. Oh, yeah, what do they do there? Well, they lift heavy things and they move them around. It's like, geez, what kind of money do they get for that? It's like, no. They don't get money for doing that. They pay the guy at the gym for the privilege to walk in that gym and move heavy things around. You see, everything we do here seems to be opposite world, right? Bizarro world. And we're doing the same thing with beef. We're doing the same thing with what we should be eating. We're doing the exact opposite. Back in 1991, you guys might not know this actress. She was pretty big back then, but when I first moved to LA, she was a good friend of mine, Alexandra Paul. And I have nothing bad to say about the woman. She's such a nice woman. but she's a lifelong vegan. She's my age and she's still a vegan. And she doesn't just walk the walk and talk the talk. She does it 1000%. And I remember back in 91, she had a car and it was a Datsun. I want to say it was a Datsun. It was before they started calling them Nissans. And what these really, but you had to be rich, you had to be an actress that had a lot of money to do this. The regular, they would take these Datsuns, pull the combustion engine out and put an electric engine in it, and then take the back seat and the trunk and everything. They would hook up a bunch of batteries, the same kind of batteries you have in your car to start your car, because they didn't have these big giant lithium batteries that you get in in one of Elon Musk's cars today, right? They would hook up a series of batteries and the car was able to go a couple of feet, 20 miles, 30 miles, right? And then you had to take it home and juice it up again, and nothing was efficient about it. And I would say to her, it's like, okay, Alexandra, you have all this battery acid, you have all these batteries, you have this car, it doesn't really work, kind of works, right? When you take it home, you have to plug it in. That energy has to come from somewhere. Some coal, you got to burn coal somewhere to get that engine running, right? You're not just juicing those batteries off of, unicorn farts. Something's got to happen for that to happen, right? But that's where we were. That's what, she's like, I don't care. I'm saving the planet. It's like, but you're not. You just made the planet worse by doing this. You're not making it better, right?
Yeah.
But you can't reason with someone that, no, this is, and by the way, I thought about her in that story because I would say to her, you have shoes on, they're made, no, this is vegan leather. You have a belt, no, that's vegan leather. Everything was vegan. And I looked at that and went, is this just like the Datsun outside? Is this costing more than it's worth? When I say cost, I'm not talking about dollar figures. I'm talking about actual what it's doing to the planet. You're not helping.
Yeah.
Agreed?
Absolutely.
Well, ladies, I don't want to keep you forever. Let's tell people where they can find you guys, because I enjoyed being on your podcast. I know it's called the something ag podcast, but I can't remember. Vegan ag podcast or something. I don't know.
It's called Discover Ag Podcast. And then you can find us, as we said, on our personal pages as well, on the internet, if you are on Instagram, all those things.
So guys, go find it. The Discover Ag Podcast. I'm going to go download you guys on this. I'm going to do some FaceTime. I'm going to download.
We're going to increase your screen time, Vinnie.
You will. But here's the thing. I don't know if I want to listen to your podcast because it's just going to make me more angry.
You're going to get fired up.
Yeah, I'm going to be shot out of a cannon all the time. I don't know if that's good. I'm getting old. I'm 60 now. I don't know if that's good for my health.
No, our podcast is a lot of fun. We just break down trending topics in the ag and food space. So it's not always negative. There are a lot of positive things we talk about, advancements in the food industry, food waste, different things we're bringing to the sustainability sector. So it's not all negative. There's a lot of positive, a lot of fun, but it's a lot of information too. So if you like learning about the food and the ag industry and you want to learn about it from, two girls that are in the industry, it's a good place to go.
Well, I will certainly be tuning in. Stay on. I got to do a couple of words of wisdom here. And I want to say goodbye to you guys off the air. Folks, I forgot to run this ad during the show because I was so intrigued with these two ladies. Villa Capelli Olive Oil is the longest running sponsor on the show. Villa Capelli, let them know we sent you. Promo code Vinnie, VINNIE, is back in stock right now. So go get it because we run them out of stock every time they have it in the United States. This is the good stuff out of Puglia. I know the owners. I knew the owners. One of them passed away, but Stephen Crutchfield still runs the company. Villa Capelli Olive Oil. So go check that out. Also, before you go to Amazon, go to VinnieTortorich.com. Click through the banner. It puts a little coal on the fire. It gets my train down the track. And I'm able to keep the show free for a gazillion years in a row. And while you're at VinnieTortorich.com, get the NSNG ebook. Everyone, look, we've had people lose now millions of pounds based on just that ebook. And I'm not exaggerating when I say millions of pounds. People have lost gazillions of pounds. Did I say gazillions? That sounds about right. So go check out the Discover Ag podcast with my two favorite women, Natalie and Tara. And, give them a good review when you're there. So on behalf of Natalie and Tara, my name is Vinnie Tortorich. Put life into living, and let's do it with Miss Barbara Mandrell.